So it's Dress Down Friday here at TopTenz, and today we're talking about 10 wild coincidences that actually happened. As always, I'm your interim host, Karl, and this video is based on an original script submitted to us by a member of our writing team, that being Jessie Clark. Give them a follow at the social media links below. Before that, let's get to it. Listen, we live in a big, strange world. So big and so strange, in fact, that the weirdest possible day would be one where absolutely nothing weird happens at all. Coincidences are a perfectly normal and expected part of life. In other words, usually nothing more than unrelated random events being strung together by human brains that are just hardwired to see patterns, even when there's really nothing there. But some coincidences are so bizarre, we can't just dismiss them as business as usual. Let's take a look at some of the wildest coincidences that have ever actually happened. Starting with number 10, the man who was struck by lightning 7 times. So let's get one of the most famous ones out of the way first, shall we? Roy Sullivan, popular internet trivia fodder, was a park ranger in the United States, and he holds a pretty impressive, if bleak, record. The man who's been struck by lightning more times than anyone else on Earth, a reported 7 whole times between 1942 and 1977. And for anyone curious about the odds of that actually happening, it's roughly 4.5 in, and the number will be below me now in case I get the wrong amount of zeros. 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0, which is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 1 and 32 separate zeros. That's pretty unlikely. And admittedly, yeah, you would be more likely to be struck by lightning if you spent most of your time outdoors, like say a park ranger, but 7 times, it's still quite a lot. And the circumstances for these lightning strikes were as varied as they were baffling. For example, in addition to being struck while he was just walking around outside, he was once struck inside his ranger station in his truck while out on patrol, and even once after he stopped being a park ranger. The repeated lightning strikes not only caused significant physical injuries, but also brought Sullivan an unusual and unwanted level of attention due to the statistical improbability of such a thing happening to an individual. Sadly, Roy did not get superpowers from any of the strikes, which I think he did. He got the opposite of whatever Domino gets in the Deadpool movies. Number 9, the weirdest double tragedy ever. So let's clarify, there's an even more bizarre version of his story doing the rounds online, often touted by less reputable fact websites and trivia dispensing individuals who just don't do the research that we do. So in that version, Erskine Lawrence Ebbin was struck and killed by the same taxi with the same driver and passenger that struck and killed his identical twin brother Neville at the exact same spot exactly 1 year later to the day. It's pretty wild, right? Not as wild as being struck by lightning 7 times, but still pretty wild. Well, now, not all of that is true, but it's a pretty close approximation of what actually happened. So Erskine and Neville weren't twins, but they were both 17 when they were killed in accidents that, yes, involved the same cab with the same driver and passenger on the same street while riding the same moped. And it is worth noting that the area of Bermuda this took place in was small, sparsely populated, and had a smaller number of cab drivers than, say, New York City. But still, we'll say this is like wild and tragic enough to qualify for a placement on this list. And that's the thing, it's like, I never understood why did they need to embellish that extra detail? The addition of the extra detail of them being twins, yeah, it makes it sound like way more improbable, but still, 2 guys being hit on the same street, on the same moped by the same guy carrying the same passenger, that's wild enough. That's a perfectly acceptable bit of trivia to drop in a 10-item list online. Number 8, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams die on the exact same day. So John Adams and Thomas Jefferson have quite a bit in common. They were both presidents, the 2nd and 3rd respectively, they were both founding fathers, and they both wore those goofy looking wigs. What's less expected though is that both men died on the same day, mere hours apart. And that alone would be freaky enough, but they both died on July 4th, 1826. 50 years to the day the Declaration of Independence was signed. Something they both had quite a large hand in. Maybe not as literally as large a hand as John Hancock, but hey, that's a joke I added to the script because I wanted to make. I've never made a John Hancock joke. No one gets that reference over here, but I know Americans do. So as you can imagine, news didn't travel very fast in the early 19th century. Allegedly, Adams's last words were, "Jefferson still lives," which wasn't true. Thomas had passed away mere hours earlier, but the nation did mourn when it learned the truth. And interestingly, it mourned again exactly 5 years later, again on July 4th, 1831, when another president, James Monroe, breathed his last. Maybe the British had something to do with it. No scriptwriter. British have done a lot of bad things. We didn't kill your presidents though. Number 7, the only man who was nuked twice. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a Japanese engineer, holds a remarkable and quite unbelievable distinction. He is the only person officially recognised to have survived both atomic bombings during World War II. So the first occurred on August 6, 1945, when he was in the city of Hiroshima on a work-related trip when the first atomic bomb was dropped by a US B-29. He suffered some injuries but managed to escape the immediate blast zone, even though tens of thousands of others in the area were vaporised or suffered agonising deaths due to injuries or radiation poisoning. And despite being wounded by, and we cannot stress this enough, an exploding nuclear bomb, Yamaguchi returned to his hometown of Nagasaki, where he arrived just in time for the second atomic bombing on August 9, 1945. He also somehow survived this second devastating event as well. Later in life, he became, quite understandably, an outspoken advocate for nuclear disarmament and shared his first-hand experiences to emphasise the horrors of nuclear warfare. And it's just, what a bargaining position. Like, any argument that guy had must have been so easy to win. Of like, well, were you there? Yeah, I was there in Nagasaki. Well, were you there in Hiroshima? Yeah, I was there too. Oh, no more questions. Number 6. Jim and Jim, separated at birth. Jim Lewis and Jim Springer were identical twins separated at birth and raised in adoptive families. Their life story gained particular attention due to the coincidences and similarities that emerged in their life despite being hundreds of miles apart. And this all began in 1979 when the two twins were reunited at the age of 39. So both Jims had been named James by their respective adoptive families, which is weird but not insanely so. It's not like James is that uncommon of a name. But get a load of these. Both had a childhood dog named Toy. Both had been married and divorced to women named Linda and remarried to women named Betty. Both had a son, one named James Allen and the other named, let's have a look at the notes, James Allen. And the similarities did not end there. They both pursued similar professions. Lewis a security guard, Springer a deputy sheriff. Both had skills in carpentry and mechanical drawing. They both enjoyed woodworking in their spare time. And get this, they even looked exactly the same. Oh, I was thinking, how long can I do that? That's a joke. Number 5, Mark Twain and Halley's Comet. Mark Twain, the celebrated American author and humorist, was born on November 30th, 1835. Well, so interesting about that date? Well, it's shortly after the passing of Halley's Comet, one of the most famous invisible comets with a distinctive bright tail. And is it I say it's Halley's Comet? Halley's Comet is often used sometimes, so I'm going to use both to annoy everybody. That alone isn't that amazing, and I guess most people know that Halley's Comet is visible from Earth approximately once every 76 years, and its appearance has been recognised and recorded for centuries. And Twain is reported to have had a fascination with this particular celestial event. He wasn't alone. Groups of people all over the planet have had their own stories and superstitions about the comet. But Twain in particular often remarked that he came into the world with the comet and he expected to leave with it as well. And we're not quite sure how he guessed that, but true to his prediction, Twain passed away on April 21st, 1910. Once again, a single day after the comet had passed by Earth. Number 4, a Lincoln saved by a booth. On April 13th, 1865, days after Robert E. Lee surrendered, effectively ending the American Civil War, famous stage actor John Wilkes Booth assassinated President Abraham Lincoln in Washington, D.C. while watching a play. It was a tragic end to a tragic chapter in US history, but it's also bizarre since a year or two earlier, accounts differ on the dates, John's brother had been saved by Abraham Lincoln's son. And this is one of the things you've probably heard about on the internet but never really did any research for yourself, so we did that for you and it's actually true. The incident took place on a train platform in Jersey City in 1863 or 1864. Again, dates aren't exactly clear on this, when Robert Todd Lincoln, a young lawyer at the time, lost his footing and stumbled, very nearly falling onto the tracks. Before anyone could react, Edwin Booth, who happened to be nearby, swiftly pulled him away from the edge, preventing a potentially fatal accident. And another bizarre little footnote here, Booth happened to be travelling with John T. Ford, owner and namesake of, you guessed it, Ford's Theatre, where President Lincoln was fatally shot. Number 3, November 9th in Germany. Often referred to the country's Day of Fate, November 9th just so happens to host a number of pivotal events in German history. For example, on November 9th, 1918, at the end of the First World War, Kaiser Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate his throne by the victorious Allied powers, signalling the beginning of the Weimar Republic of Germany's interwar period. Again on November 9th, this time in 1938, we have Kristallnacht, known as the Night of Broken Glass, where violent anti-Jewish pogroms erupted across Nazi Germany. Jewish homes, businesses and synagogues were vandalised and destroyed, and many Jews were arrested, injured or killed. This brutal event signified a harrowing escalation of anti-Semitic policies, setting the stage for what would become the Holocaust. Moving forward in history once again to 1989, again on November 9th, the Berlin Wall fell, symbolising the end of the Cold War and the reunification of Germany. And due to these and several other incidents not mentioned in this video, but you can look up online if you're so inclined, it's still a superstition in Germany to this day, and there are several like politicians, policymakers, just people like high up in the government who just refuse to make decisions on that pivotal day. So solar eclipses, people who don't know the exact mechanics of how they work, is when the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, blocking out the sun and turning day into night. It's a predictable, understandable, and still fascinating and unmissable event that occurs every few years. But have you ever stopped to think about how bizarrely coincidental that is, that the moon just so happens to be the right size and the right distance away from the Earth to almost perfectly block out the sun every few years? If it was any closer or any further or any bigger, the phenomenon wouldn't be nearly as wild or as visually impressive to see. And for anyone curious about the specifics here, the moon's diameter is about 400 times smaller than that of the sun, but it's almost exactly 400 times closer to the Earth. So this allows for basically a perfect blockage that still leaves just enough of the sun left for a corona eerily visible around the edge. But please just take our word for that one, because don't look directly at the sun. That's bad times. Don't do it. Do you like having eyes? That's how you lose your eyes. Finally, number 1, Stephen Hawking's lifespan. So on January 8, 1942, in Oxford, England, England's future physicist Stephen Hawking was born. But January 8th also happened to be a significant event for another world-changing cosmologist, Galileo Galilei. The Italian polymath who pioneered contributions to modern science passed away on January 8, 1642, precisely 300 years before Hawking's birth. And coincidences in regards to science and physics and math don't stop there. So Stephen Hawking passed away on March 14th, 2018. Well, March 14th is no ordinary day. To mathematicians and just fans of science and physics in general, it's known as Pi Day 314, and it's celebrated around the world by scientists, physicists, mathematicians, and just, fans of education, science, and math in general as Pi Day. People make pies, they give away pies, people bake pies in the shape of the pi symbol. It's just a good day to eat some pie. But March 14th isn't just Pi Day, it's also the birthday of another scientific luminary, Albert Einstein, whose groundbreaking theories of relativity changed our understanding of the universe and set the stage for Hawking's own discoveries, particularly those revolving around black holes, singularities, and the nature of time itself. But I doubt any of those geniuses could have seen that one coming. Pi Day. So I don't eat much pie, but I do like the look of a pie. There's just something like very visually appealing about like a very nice pie. And it's like, I think one of my favourite images from my cartoons, the idea of a pie being so delicious, so well made, so perfect, that the waft of it can carry like a cartoon cat through the air. Also, I guess Stephen Hawking did some cool stuff. Anyway, thank you for tuning into this episode of Top 10s. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed hosting it. And find links to my social links, the links for the author below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you've got anything to say about it, any feedback, any other things you'd like us to discuss, any other coincidences from history you're aware of that you'd like to let us know about, do so in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to see more. If you want to not see more like this, is it the hoodie? Should I dress up? As always, I'd like to wish everyone out there the day you all deserve. Cheers. If anyone wondering, that's a cool ass hoodie, where can I get it from? It's from Japan, and it was intended for, apparently the label says, large husky boys, which just apparently so happens to be my exact body type. Who knew? And the alternate version apparently didn't say Broly on it. It just said, ah, in Japanese, which, as fans of the character will know, is the only thing he ever says. Anyway,